Today's daf we're going to be learning is Ketubot Daf Kaf Gimel. Chodesh Tov to everyone. This week's learning is dedicated by Marsha Baum in loving memory of Chaim Simcha ben Aharon Halevi and Liba on his 19th year at site today. My father was a larger-than-life individual whose impact is still felt many years after his ptira. He is missed every day. We're going to get started now from the bottom of Kaf Bet Amud Bet at the bottom with a Braita Tanu Rabbanan. We started this yesterday. We're going to go back to it. If you recall, yesterday we had a statement by Rabbi Yochanan about differentiating between a case where two witnesses say the person died versus two witnesses say the person didn't die, like the husband, or two witnesses said she was divorced versus two witnesses who says she wasn't divorced. And we had a different halacha in each one, that in one case, in the case of death, we said, if she already marries based on the first testimony, then she doesn't have to get divorced. However, if in the divorce case, if she got married already, she would still have to get divorced. And we had three different explanations as to why there's a difference. Now we're going to have a Braita, which has, again, two different cases. I'll just review from yesterday. The first case is two witnesses say she was betrothed versus two witnesses who say she wasn't betrothed. And then she went ahead and got married based on the testimony that she wasn't betrothed. And then if she already married, she doesn't have to get divorced, even though, right, she shouldn't ideally get married. And then versus the case of divorce, which just like Rabbi Yochanan had said, this Braita also says, if she already got married based on it, she actually can't stay married. So the Gemara asks, Maishna Resha, Maishna Seifa, just like we asked in the previous one, what's the difference between the two cases? Why are we stricter with the divorce case rather than the betrothal case? To which Abaye answers, just like he answered in the previous case, Amar Abaye, Tirgama be'ed echad. Explain that the case is with one witness. Eid echad omer nitkadsha ve'eid echad omer lo nitkadsha. One witness said she was betrothed, and the other witness said she wasn't betrothed. It's not two witnesses, like the Braita said. It's actually really only one witness. Why does this matter? Well, travayu b'pnuya kamasade. Both of them basically say that it's before whatever they claim either transpired or didn't transpire, she was a single woman. And then she was either betrothed or she wasn't betrothed. So you actually have two witnesses saying she was single. Which means, now you have this person who says, even though she was single, she was betrothed. Well, he's only one. And one doesn't stand up to a testimony of two. Seifa, the second part, though, with divorce, this we already explained in the previous time we had this. If you say she's divorced, you say she's not divorced, they both agree that she was actually married. So you have two witnesses saying she's married, and only one comes and says she got divorced. So, right, the one who said she's divorced is only one. So the one who says she's divorced doesn't really hold any water because two say she was married. So that's why in that case, she'll have to get divorced if she actually married based on this. It's not enough to go on, and she has to separate from her husband. So now, because we have to be concerned, maybe she's a married woman. That's the first answer. Rav Ashi gives a different answer. Rav Ashi Amar, just like in the previous case, this time it wasn't. Actually, let me just check one thing. It was Rav Asi. I wonder if some people say it's Rav. Yeah, some people say it's actually Rav Ashi also in the previous case. Last time we had three answers. There was Abaye, Rava, and Rav Asi. Some people say Rav Asi is actually Rav Ashi, just like here. So Rav Ashi says, Le'olam trei u'trei. No, it's really 2 and 2, like the literal reading of the Braita. So what's the difference? Well, he says v'ipuch. What you have to switch is which is which. You have to switch it. It's not true that nitkadsha, she can stay married, and nitgarsha, she has to get divorced. It's the opposite. Specifically, nitkadsha, she has to get divorced if she married based on this testimony. Why? Well, they explain like this. It's a little bit different than we thought. We saw that she was betrothed. Okay, that's not much different than she was betrothed. But here comes the difference. Two say, we didn't see that she was betrothed. So now What does it mean we didn't see? Didn't see, we could have missed it, right? That doesn't mean anything. So that's why, so now we say, Harezo lo tinase. She can't get married. Why? Right? And not only that, ve'im nisei tetzei. And if she did get married based on it, she has to get divorced from her second husband. Why? Because the real only testimony we have is we saw her get married, right? But get betrothed. Saying that we didn't see her really is nothing, to which the Gemara says, Pshita, that's quite obvious. Saying I didn't happen to notice that she got married, that doesn't mean she's not married. So again, married, I'm using it loosely. It really means betrothed, either which way. So now they say, right, lo ri'inua ein araya, not seeing doesn't mean anything. To which the Gemara answers, lo tzricha, and what we need it for is, dedaire b'chatzer achad. They live in the same courtyard. When people live in the same courtyard, we assume, you might have thought, in ita dinit kacha, right? Don't you know when your neighbors get married? First of all, it's not necessarily true. I happen to live on a small street, and I actually really don't know. My across the street neighbor, theoretically, her kids could get married, and I would have no idea because we don't have so much to do with each other. So you might have thought that just because we live in the same courtyard, then if someone were to get betrothed, everybody would know about it. Kamash malan, they come to teach you. Some people forget about, like I said, I don't have so much to do with them. Here we assume you have what to do with them, but they might actually get betrothed quietly under the radar. A Corona wedding. A Corona wedding would specifically be in your backyard. Less likely you would miss it. On the other hand, remember what we said before. In those days, who was in charge of the wedding? We've talked about this in the past. The groom's family is in charge of the wedding. Here we're talking about the bride. So she might have had a very quiet wedding in the groom's house, and nobody would actually know. Even the neighbors might not know. So therefore, the fact that these people said, we didn't see she was betrothed and they're her next door neighbors, it doesn't mean anything. Okay, we basically don't take it seriously, but you might have thought we did, but no. What about the Nitgarsha case now? Well, Seifa, the second part of the bride, Shnayim omrim re'inu ashenitgarsha, Ushnayim omrim lo re'inu ashenitgarsha. Two say we saw she got divorced, and two say we didn't see she got divorced. Again, it seems strange. What do you mean you didn't see she got divorced? Why would we? Right. So now, harezo lo tinase, ve'im nisei lo tetzei. She shouldn't get married because maybe she's really not divorced, and if she did, though, she doesn't have to. My kamashal. What does this teach you? Again, we're going to assume, right, that what? This must be in the same courtyard. And even though they live in the same courtyard, you might miss that she got divorced. So, hainuha, right? Now, again, we're going to say, but right, lo re'idu ashenitgarsha doesn't hold anything, which means we're going to go by nitgarsha. Now, you might have thought, well, if they're in the same courtyard, shouldn't they know? Kamash malam, right? That comes to teach you. No, you wouldn't have necessarily known. To which the Gemara says, hainuhach. Well, then the second part is teaching the exact same thing as the first. There's nothing new here. To which they say, well, ma'u detema gabe kiddushin hu davide inashi demakacha b'tzina. Aval gabe gerushin im ita di'igarsha kali lelamilta. You might have thought when it comes to marriage, betrothal, people do that quietly. When it comes to divorce, everybody knows about it. Why? Probably because she wants people to know she's divorced so she can go get remarried. Hamash malan, therefore, it comes to teach you, no, sometimes people get married and divorced privately, right? Maybe some people don't want people to know that they're actually getting divorced. It's embarrassing. They might do it quietly. Okay. And therefore, if you say, I didn't see she got divorced, that doesn't really mean anything, even if you're her next door neighbor. Now we're going to go to the last line of the Mishnah. So let's just go back to the Mishnah for a minute. On Kaf Bet Amud Aleph, the Mishnah said, if the woman says, I'm married, but I got divorced, I was married, but I got divorced, right? It all depends. Do we only know about her marriage from her, or do we know from witnesses? If it's only from her, and we believe her. If it's from witnesses, then we don't trust her at all. Same thing with Nishbeti v'Torani. I was taken into captivity, but I'm pure, right? Meaning I wasn't raped by a Gentile, right? And then we believe her. Unless there were witnesses, then we don't believe her. The last line of the Mishnah says, and if Mishani said, if once she was married, Bao Aiden, the Aiden came after she already remarried, based on the testimony, the first testimony, right? Her own testimony. She doesn't have to get divorced. So the question is, to which case is this referring? Case number one, about I'm a married woman, but I got divorced. Or case number two, I was in captivity, but I wasn't raped. Now, or maybe it's both. So we're going to see Rabbi Yoshaya Matnei Reisha. He learned it on the first case of the married woman, the woman who says I was married but divorced. Rabbi Bar Avi Matnei Sefer. He teaches it on the second case. If you say it on the first part of the Eshet Ish, then you'll obviously say it on the second part as well. Because they were lenient when it came to a woman taken into captivity. Now, there's two reasons given by the commentaries as to why we're more lenient when it comes to captivity. One reason is because in captivity, what's the issue? The issue is, were you raped? And if you were by a Gentile, then you can't marry a Kohen. That is only a lo taseit for a zonah to marry a Kohen, as opposed to an eshet ish. If she really is a married woman, it's isur karet for her to be with anyone else, which is much more severe. And therefore, we have to be much more cautious in that case than in the case of the Kohen. Some people don't like that answer because they say, what do you mean? That's Torah law and that's Torah law, and we should be just as equally stringent in both. We don't distinguish just because one is a more severe punishment, even though we have seen that we are sometimes more careful because of karet, but it doesn't seem right. Some people disagree with this, and therefore they give a different reason why it was shvuya hikilu, and that's because in the case of a woman where she says, I'm married, but I got divorced, if she's a married woman, she's 100% forbidden to anybody else. However, in the case of I was taken into captivity, captivity alone doesn't forbid you to a Kohen. It's only if, like, there's a high percentage, let's say, that you were raped by a Gentile there, but it's only a percentage, right? It's only a probability. It's not definite. As opposed to the woman who was a married woman, at that point, she's definitely forbidden to other people. And that might be why we can be lenient when it comes to a woman in captivity. So if you say that we're going to leave you and let you, if you already got remarried, it's okay. You don't have to get divorced. If you say it about the first case, the Eshet Ish, which is more strict, obviously you're going to say it about the Shvuya case. But if you taught it on the say, if you think it's referring to the latter case about the woman in captivity, you would say then then it wouldn't apply. In the first case, then, if you did get married, you'd have to actually get divorced because there's a high chance that maybe you're still a married woman. So why don't we suggest, like, what's the basis of the root of their machloket, their debate? Must be about Rav Hamnuna's statement. What did we learn about Rav Hamnuna yesterday? That he says that a woman doesn't have the audacity to go in front of her husband and say, I'm divorced, if she's really not divorced. So how would this connect? Well, and this is the root of them. So mandimat nela aresha, the one who says it's about the first case, itle de Rav Hamnuna. He believes Rav Hamnuna, who says when she says I'm a married woman but I'm divorced, she wouldn't lie and say I'm divorced if she really wasn't. Umandimat nela seifa lele de Rav Hamnuna, and the one who says it's only about the shvuya will say we don't really believe her when it comes to saying I'm divorced, because people would lie about saying they're divorced. Now, there's a little bit of something missing here, and we're going to talk about this in a second, but I just want to point it out in case you're already thinking it, which is Rav Hamnuna specifically said a woman wouldn't have the audacity to look right in front of her husband and say, I'm divorced, when she's not really divorced. Nobody said this case was in front of the husband. So now the Gemara says to reject this suggestion, no, that's not the case. Everyone agrees with Rav Hamnuna that she wouldn't have the audacity to go in front of her husband and say, I'm divorced, when she's really not. But here the machloket is, Demar Savar ki itmar de Rav Hamnuna bifanav. Aval shalo bifanav mi'izah. One holds that what Rav Hamnuna said was only in front of him. But if not in front of him, right, she goes to the court, she'll lie about it. As long as he's not there, she has no problem lying about it. Umar Saval. But the other one holds shelo b'fanav nami ena mi'izah. Not in front of him. No, if she's not in front of him, she would. Right. So sorry. Let me just make sure I said it right. The first opinion is that if he's not there, she would have the audacity to say something, which means I just want to connect it. I want to go back for a minute. she would have the audacity to lie, which means that we're not going to believe her, which means that this last line of the Mishnah was really only on the second case. And when it relates to the first case, there's a high probability she's lying, which means, because we do think she would have the nerve to say it not in front of him, which means that we're not going to allow her to stay married to the second guy. Right? Remember, there's 2 witnesses that say she's divorced and 2 that say she's not. Umar Saval, sorry, I just got confused. It's not the 2 witnesses and the 2 witnesses, my mistake. It's that 2 witnesses came and said that she was an Eshadish, and it's just her word saying she's not, and we don't know whether to believe her or not, and we think there's a high chance she's lying. So therefore, we will make her get divorced if she got married based on this. Aval Mar Saval, the other one who holds even in the first case of an Eshadish, she still can stay married. So that if she already remarried, we'll leave her and let her get married because Mar Savar Shelo B'fanav Nami Enamiza. She wouldn't say I'm divorced if she's not divorced, even not in front of her husband. He takes Rav Hamnuna one step farther. A woman wouldn't have the audacity to lie about being divorced if she's not really divorced. Going back to that line again, if once she gets married, witnesses come. Amar Avodah Shmuel, the father of Shmuel, said, Lo niseit mamash. By the way, we don't mean just if she got married. We even mean ela kevan she'itiru alinaseh. If the judges rule that she can get married, right? She comes forward and says, I was married, but I'm no longer married. And there were no witnesses. The rabbis rule, okay, you can get married based on this. And then witnesses come. She hasn't gotten remarried, but they ruled that she could. Already, right? Even though she's not yet married, we don't go back on it. She can go get married based on this. But wait, doesn't it say she doesn't have to leave the marriage, which sounds like it's only if she's actually married? The way to read it is, lo tetzei doesn't mean she doesn't have to get divorced. Lo tetzei means she doesn't have to leave her original permissibility. Meaning once the rabbis permitted it, we leave her in that status and she can remain permitted, even if witnesses now come forward. Tanu Rabbanah. Now we get to a Braita, another Braita. Amra nishbeitu Torani v'yesh li edim shetorani. Let's say she provides a little bit more information. She says, I was taken into captivity, but I wasn't raped by anybody. V'yesh li edim shetorani. And I have witnesses that can support that. They can come and claim we were with her the whole time and we saw nobody raped her. Ein omrim namtin ad she'aviu edim. In order to make sure that she's telling the truth, we can rely on Hapesh Asaru Hapesh Itil exclusively. She's the one who provided us information that she was taken into captivity. We wouldn't have known that without her. Therefore, we can let her permit herself, right? To let herself be permitted. But we don't have to make sure that what she said about the witnesses, I can bring witnesses to corroborate what I'm saying. We don't have to make sure that they actually come forward. But we allow her immediately to be permitted. Let's say they permit her based on this psak that we just said. And then witnesses show up and they say, oh, we don't know. We have no idea. She doesn't have to get divorced either, even though she claimed that the witnesses knew and they claim they don't. But if witnesses come forward at this point and say, we saw her be raped by these men, then even if she has already sons from the new husband, she has to get divorced. Now we get a famous story. There were these women who were taken into captivity that were brought to Hadran. So they were taken into captivity somewhere else and they were brought to Hadran. So the father, Shmuel, brings shomrim, people to watch, to make sure that nobody rapes them at this point. So Shmuel sees this, and he says, what are you doing, Dad? I don't understand. Amar le Shmuel, va'areina man nitrinu. Nobody was watching them until this point. They could have been raped before. What's it going to help to have these guards put up? You know, it will help a lot because it'll help prevent these women from getting raped. Now, it's true. Maybe they won't be able to marry a Kohen, but it will definitely prevent them from being raped. So it's a little bit strange that Shmuel doesn't seem concerned with that. And his father seems a little upset with him by his comments. So his father says back to him, Amar le, he reprimands him, and he says to him the following. Ilu benate chavyan, if it was your daughters, mi havet mezalzabahu kulehai, would you be so disrespectful to them to not think that it's important to put up guards here? As you wouldn't treat these women in captivity like this. This is a really good lesson to teach your child, right? Or to teach anybody, which is if you're going to rule for somebody, try to put yourself into their position, right? Try to imagine that this is you and you're going through this situation. And in this case, it's you're the father of these daughters, right? Are you going to want to leave them without guards here? Anything could happen to them. So now we get the big line, which is really that Havya kishgaga hayotzami sheyotzemi lifnei shalit. This is like a mistaken, like a slip of the tongue, which comes out from the mouth of the ruler. Basically, we're going to say Avua de Shmuel. The term really means, like what we normally say is, you gave it the ayin hara, right? You caused this. Basically, what Shmuel's father said to him is, wait a minute. Right? Why don't you try to put yourself in that situation? And in fact, Shmuel's daughters get taken into captivity. And this is very famous that Shmuel's daughters were taken into captivity. Comes from this story. The Ishtabyan binte Demar Shmuel. Okay, the story is more elaborate in the Yerushalmi. They get taken into captivity. Va'askinu la'ard Yisrael, and they bring them to Israel. Ukman l'shvuyayinu ma'abrai va'ayla l'bei midrash Rabbi Chanina. His daughters were very smart. Okay, you talk about smart women and knowing halacha and how that can help you. So they get to the Beit Midrash and they want to know, can they marry a Kohen? So what do? They make sure their captors stay away from them and outside the Beit Midrash, and they come into the Beit Midrash alone without any sort of evidence that they were taken into captivity. Ha'amra, so one says, Nishbeti u'torani, I was taken into captivity and I'm pure. Nothing happened to me. And the other one says, I was taken into captivity and I'm pure. Sharinu. So they say, okay, you can marry a Kohen because apesha saru apeshi tir. We don't have any evidence to know that you were in captivity other than that you told us this. So sof ul atu shovayinu. So in the end, in come their captors, and it becomes clear that they were taken into captivity. Amar Rabbi Chanina binan demorian inum. These girls are very smart. They're obviously the daughters of somebody very smart. Igale milta de binte demar Shmuel havian. And then he finds out that these were the daughters of Shmuel. Amar le Rabbi Chanina le Rav Shemen bar Abba. He goes to Rav Shemen bar Abba, who Rashi tells us is a relative, and you'll see this from the Gemara in a minute. He's a relative of Shmuel, and he's a Kohen. And he says to him, Puk itapel bekrovotech. Go take care of your relatives. Go marry these women. Okay, he can't marry both of them because they're sisters, but in fact, over time, he does marry both of them because when one of them dies, he marries the other. So he says, go marry them. Amar le the Rabbi Chanina, Rav Shem bar Abba says to Rabbi Chanina, what are you talking about? Ha'ika edim b'medinat hayam. But there's witnesses from abroad who are going to who could testify to the fact that these women were taken into captivity. In which case, we can't rely on hapesha saru hapeshi itil, because we have witnesses, right? What did we learn? You can't marry, right? If you're already married, you can stay married, but you can't go get married based on this. So hash to me, come on. He says, but these witnesses you claim exist in the Medina Hayam. He says, what are you talking about? Edim could be in the north, but we're not going to forbid them based on the possibility that there's witnesses out there. In other words, I don't see them in front of me, so we don't have to worry about that. Tama, now what do they say here? One can infer from this situation that Tama de lo atu edim. The reason is because edim didn't actually appear before us. Ha atu edim mitascha, but if edim had showed up, they'd be forbidden. Ha maravur de Shmuel, didn't the father of Shmuel already tell us? Kevan shitiru ali naseh. Rabbi Chanina already ruled that they could get married before any witnesses showed up, before we had any evidence of anything. Even if witnesses would have showed up, it shouldn't make a difference. Afa pishaloni said, right? Even if they didn't get married, they still don't need to get, right? They're still permitted because the rabbis already permitted it. So now they say, Amar Rav Ashi, Eidei Tuma Itmar. No, you misunderstood what happened here. There were actually Edim, what he was claiming, Rav Shemen bar Abba, is that there's witnesses that can attest to the fact that they were raped. And that's what he was saying. Not that they were taken into captivity, but they not only were they in captivity, but they were also raped. That's what he was saying we have witnesses about. And that's what Rabbi Hanina said. I don't see them testifying. Maybe there are, but we don't know of them. We don't have to worry about it. Okay, I just want to look up one thing. Yeah. Okay. So now, yeah. Anyway, what you see about this story is a bunch of really interesting things. Number one, you see that his daughters are really smart and that it's okay to, when you know halacha and know how to use it to your advantage, it's okay to do that, right? Rabbi Hanina was very impressed with them, that they were able to be smart enough to make sure that their captors were nowhere in sight when they came in and did what they did. And once they got their heter, they were good to go. So it's almost like the truth doesn't always matter. It's the halachic truth, right? How this fits into the halachic system. And again, we'd always try to be more lenient, especially if women were taken into captivity. We want to find ways. We already learned b'shvui kilu. And the fact that there might exist witnesses out there, if we don't see them in front of us, we don't have to rule based on that. Okay, moving now to Amabet, new Mishnah. Shtei nashim shenishbu. If you have two women taken into captivity, like Shmuel's daughters, for example, zot omeret nishbeitiu to'orani, v'zot omeret nishbeitiu to'orani. One says, I was taken into captivity, but nothing happened. And the other one says, I was taken into captivity, but nothing happened. Einan ne'emanot. Okay, now, what do you mean? We just learned they are. So Rashi explains that when it says Shtei nashim shenishbu, we mean that there were witnesses attesting to the fact that they were taken into captivity, and that's why they're not believed. But if each one testifies about the other, I was with her and I know that she wasn't raped, and I was with her, but I know she wasn't raped, we believe them. Because just like we believe one witness to say that a woman's husband is dead and she can get remarried, we believe one witness to say, when it comes to a shvuya, a woman in captivity, we believe another woman or another man to say, I saw and there was no issue. And not only that, in this case, there's a concern for what we call gomlim. Maybe they will lie to help the other. Okay, so the other one doesn't get stuck. They'll come up with this system. Oh, I'll lie for you and you'll lie for me. We don't have to worry about that. We allow each one to testify about each other. We're not worried about that. Now we're going to have a braita, Tanu Rabbanan, which has 4 cases listed here. Anit me'ah v'chaverti toah. We're going to have 4 different possibilities. One says, I am impure, but my friend is pure. Meaning we were both taken into captivity. I was raped, but she wasn't. Ne'emenet, she's believed. Okay, because we'll see this inside in a minute, but I'm tme'ah, that's shavi nafsha chaticha d'yisura. She makes herself forbidden. We already learned, if you forbid yourself, you're forbidden. But my friend is Torah, she's believed to testify about a friend, that works, because one witness can attest to that. Ani Torah v'chaverti tme'ah. I'm pure, but my friend is impure. She was raped. I was not. And an eminent. She's not believed for either one. She can't testify about herself because there's witnesses we're going to have to see. Must be there's witnesses. And her friend, because otherwise it would be a pesha asal. Her friend, she's not believed to make her friend impure because, first of all, if there's witnesses, her friend is going to be impure no matter what, not based on her testimony. Ani v'chaverti tme'ah. Me and my friend are both impure. We were both raped. Ne'emenet al atzma, because of shavi nafsha, right? She can make herself impure. Ve'ena ne'emenet al chaverta. She's not believed about her friend, because again, either there were witnesses or there weren't witnesses, but it has nothing to do with her testimony. In a minute, we're going to see, were there witnesses or were there not witnesses? Ani v'chaverti Torah, me and my friend are both pure. Ne'emenet al chaverta ve'ena ne'emenet al atzma. She's believed about her friend is Torah, but she's not believed about herself. So now we're going to go through all these cases, even if you didn't fully understand why the law is like this, we're going to go through them and try to figure out what exactly is the situation. Amar. So now we go back to case number 2. Anit, because the case number 1 is pretty obvious. I'm Tme'ah, my friend is Torah. She's believed about both because she can purify it, right? She could say her friend is Torah. She's believed one witness is enough. And she's believed about herself because she can make herself impure, right? She can make herself into Isur. Right? One can always forbid oneself. We talked about that a bunch of times already. So now I'm pure. My friend is not. She was raped. I was not. She's not believed. Hey, Chidami, what's the case? If there's no witnesses, well, she should be believed about herself because Nishbeti v'torani kamri, right? It's like she said. She basically said, I was taken into captivity. We didn't know otherwise. And I'm pure. She should be believed. Elapshita di'ika edim. It must be there were witnesses. If that's the case. The next case doesn't make any sense, though. Ema mitziata, case number 3. Ani v'chaverti tme'a, we're both impure. Ne'emenet al atzma ve'ena ne'emenet al chaverta. Now, idi'ika edim, amai lo mahemnet. If there were witnesses, why is she not believed to say that her friend is impure? Okay, there were witnesses and her friend should be considered impure. Elapshita deleka edim. It must be there weren't witnesses. Ema seifa, but now you get to the 4th case. So in other words, case number 2, there were witnesses that said they were taken into captivity. Case number 3, there were no witnesses that say they were taken into captivity. Case number 4, me and my friend were both not raped. She's believed about a friend, but not about herself. Now, if there were no witnesses, again, we're back to the question on 2. Now, why is she not believed about herself? So now we end up with a big problem. We're going to say, case number 2 and case number 4, there were witnesses. Mitziata, case number 3, that's very weird. To which Abaye answers, Amar Abaye, answer number 1 is yes, in fact, it could be true. It's a little bit odd, but yes, there's no other way to explain this. First case and the last case, there were witnesses. The middle case, there weren't. Okay. But Rav Papa Amal, and he's going to explain this whole Braita in a bit of a different scenario, in order to say that Kula Dika Edim, they're really all talking about there were witnesses. And now there was one element they forgot to tell you about, which is Ika Eid Echad Ka'apich. Whatever she said, there was one witness who came and said the opposite. So now we're going to play out each scenario. Amra, case number 1. Ani tzme'a v'chaverti Torah. I was raped, my friend wasn't. V'amrala, Eid, right? And comes a witness and says, Eid Echad, At Torah, were not raped, the opposite of what she said, and your friend, Chavertech Tme'an, your friend was raped. So now, let's go back to each one. Ihi, she herself, okay, the aide said she was pure, but she said she wasn't. So, she turned herself into, right? She basically forbade herself, even though there was no reason to, but she did. So she's forbidden. Now, we have one witness that said, right, the woman says, my friend was pure. She wasn't raped. Based on that, what do we say? We're going to be lenient. We're going to allow one witness to be like 2. And then the other witness comes and says, your friend was raped. One witness doesn't stand any ground to 2 witnesses. So that works. Case number 2. I was not raped. My friend was raped. One witness came and said, you're impure and your friend is, right? You were raped, but your friend was not. Now, remember, there were witnesses that said she was taken into captivity. Once you have witnesses, her word of nothing happened to me is irrelevant. We don't believe her because it's not a pesha sawa peshitil. So since there's no witnesses, since there are witnesses, because remember, Papa said all the cases, there were 2 witnesses that said she was taken into captivity. And then it's just her word against the other witness's word, whether she was raped or not. So lav kol kamina, we're certainly not going to believe her when she says I wasn't raped, because that's not a pesha sawa peshitil. She has no credibility for herself. She's obviously just trying to get herself out of it. Chavirta mishtarya puma de'ed. Now, remember, her friend, the witness said she's pure, and she said her friend was, right? The witness said her friend wasn't raped. She said her friend was raped. Well, this again, one witness, as soon as one witness says you weren't raped, we believe the witness as if the witness is 2. So this other fellow captor, the woman, the captive, the woman was not believed against 2 witnesses, even though it's only 1, but 1 counts as 2. Case number 3. Ani v'chaverti tme'a. Both of us were raped. But one witness comes along and says, neither of you was raped. So regarding herself, she turned herself into, right? She forbade herself. And the friend has one witness saying she's okay, which means that witness is believed as 2, and the other woman's testimony doesn't stand any water. So the Gemara asks, why do we need this? Hainu Reisha. We learned both those principles, Shavya Nafsha, and that one witness is believed. Between case number 1 and case number 2, we learned both those principles. Case number 3 doesn't need to tell us something we've already learned. So they say, well, you might have thought this case was different. Because in this case, what happened? The one woman said, neither of us was raped. So now, Mao Detema, you might have thought, Hani Travayu Torot Ninu. But I'm sorry. She said, me and my friend were both raped. Okay? Now, you might have thought, really, Hani Travayu Torot Ninu. Both of them are pure. So if they were both not raped, why did she say both of us were raped? Well, because of Tamut Nafshim Plishtim. We've seen this before, right? What did Shimshon do? He brought down the building, killed himself with the Plishtim, right? He was willing to sacrifice himself in order to destroy the Plishtim. Maybe she hates her friend so much that she's willing to bring herself down in order to mess up her friend. And the fact that we were both raped was really just to mess up her friend from marrying a Kohen. And she didn't really care that she can't marry a Kohen herself. And maybe that's what she was trying to do. And therefore, maybe we don't believe her at all. And maybe even she isn't problem, right? Maybe she even can marry a Kohen, because maybe we're assuming this isn't a case of Shavya Nafsh. She wasn't trying to make herself forbidden. She was really trying to just mess up her friend. But maybe really they're both not raped. Kamash Malan, that we don't go by that. If she says I'm impure and my friend is impure, right? I was raped and so was she. About herself, we're going to believe her. About her friend, we're not going to believe her, again, because there's one witness standing against, and that one witness counts as 2. Case number 4. Me and my friend are both not raped. But one witness stands against them and say you're both raped. And again, there's witnesses that say they were both taken into captivity. So again, we don't believe her testimony regarding herself because there's witnesses that stand against. There's no apesh asar or apesh itil. Chaverta, her friend, mishtaria pumadida. Her friend is permitted because of, she said, me and my friend, neither one was raped. She counts as like 2 witnesses in order to prevent her friend from becoming forbidden to the Kohen. Again, the Gemara asked, though, Hatulamali, what do we need this for? Hainuresha Deresha. This was learned already from the first case, right? The first case taught us that her friend, right? You believe her regarding her friend, right? The first case was Anit Me'ava Chaverti Torah. So she's believed regarding her friend because one witness counts as 2 to permit her friend. So we already learned that. So they say, well, Ma'u detema ki mehemne bimkom de pasla nafsha. What's the difference between this case and the first case? First case, she forbade herself, but permitted her friend. That might be where we believe her. This is the exact opposite of what we said about case 3. In a case where it's the same idea, but the reverse logic. Because she permits herself, you might have thought maybe she said about her friend is pure because, right, her friend wasn't raped because she wants to really say, I wasn't raped. She's hoping to save herself. And in doing that, she'll lie about her friend to say neither of us was raped in order to make her case look better, as if no women were raped there. And therefore, you might have thought she's not believed even about the friend because we're just assuming she's lying to try to save herself, even though halachically it won't save herself, but she doesn't know that. She hopes that it would. Hamash malan, that we don't say that. Okay, so with that, we've resolved all those cases and why the halacha is that way. And in addition, why you needed a separate case to be told and you couldn't have just derived from the earlier cases. New Mishnah. Just like the 2 women who were taken into captivity, also 2 men that we're going to talk about credibility, about how we establish that one's a Kohen in order to allow him to eat Truma. So Zeh Omer Kohenani, one says I'm a Kohen, V'Zeh Omer Kohenani, and the other one says I'm a Kohen. Einam Nemanim, we don't believe them to let them eat Truma because they're testifying about themselves. Ubizman shehem mi'idim zeh et zeh, harei elu nemanim. If they testify for each other, just like with the women, we believe them. And again, we don't worry about this gomlim, that maybe each one said, oh, I'll lie for you, you lie for me. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein ma'alim l'kuna al pi ed echad. This doesn't work because you only have one witness. One witness we allow by the shvuya because we said shvuya kilo. We want to allow her to get married. Here to allow the coin to eat truma, we can't allow just one witness. I'm a Rabbi Elazar. מתי? במקום שיש עוררין. אבל במקום שאין עוררין, מעלים לכהונה על פי יד אחד. He said it all depends. If you have people who are raising doubts about their kahuna, then we don't believe one witness. But if nobody's raising any doubts, and it's just a matter, are they telling the truth or not? We have no reason not to believe them, and we do believe one witness. Rashbag says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Askan, we allow one witness. Now, there's a bit of a problem here because there seems to be a lot of repetition. And Rashi tells us, if you look at Rashi on Ma'alin at the end there, Hecha deleka gomlin. When Rabbi Elazar said, you can use one witness, he said only if you're not worried about gomlin. And that's the difference between him and the Tanakama, because Tanakama says we're not worried about gomlin. We do allow one witness, but not if it's each one testifying about each other, because we are worried about gomlin. Okay, and then we still have to figure out about Rashbag and what he says different from the others. Anyway, we're going to leave that to the Gemara much later. Now, the Gemara does something, it's a little out of order here. Really should have been on 2 Mishnayot ago on the Mishnah from Kaf Ben Amud Aleph, which, if you remember, until this point, until we got to these 2 women and the 2 Kohanim, we were talking about cases of Hapesh Asar or Hapesh Itil. There were 4 cases. Case number 1 was Modeh Rabbi Yeshua in the case of Sadeh. This field was your father's, but I bought it from him. Then we had the case of the witnesses. This one, right? This is my signature, but right, these are our signatures, but we were forced into it or we were disqualified. Then we had the woman who says, I'm a married woman, but I'm actually divorced, right? I was married, but I'm divorced. And the woman who said I was taken into captivity, but I wasn't raped. So now, Kol Hane Lamali, why do we need all 4 cases? And we're only going to start getting the answer now. We'll continue in tomorrow's daf about the continuation of this. Tzriche, we need them. Why? If you just had the first case about the case of the field, you might have thought, in this case, he started off by saying, this was your father's, but I purchased it. Now, the whole question is, maybe he really starts by saying, this is your father's, and he's going to admit that it's not his, but then he regrets it, and he says, oh, wait, but I bought it, and maybe he's lying about the second part. Well, there's good reason to think he's lying, because there's drara de mamona. There's a monetary loss here. And that's why that case is unique, right? That, in other words, in a case where there's a monetary loss, we're going to say, actually, it works like this. Because there's a monetary loss, he should have not even started by saying, it's your father's. He should have just lied and said, it's mine, right? And it was never belonged to you. So the fact that he provides us with more information that would actually look bad for him and he would lose money, he must be actually telling the truth. But Eidim deleka drara de mamona, but when you verify your signatures on a document that has nothing to do with you, it's someone else's document, where it's no financial loss on your part, so you have no problem to start raising, oh yes, I did sign on that, but it's not my signatures. What's the worst case scenario, right? So maybe you really aren't telling the truth just because you could have said a better lie. Because it's not such a bad lie, because it doesn't really affect you so badly. So, maybe you wouldn't think, hapesh asau, hapesh itir, right? The fact that you started telling us things you didn't need to tell us, well, what was the big deal if you told us that? And now we're going to take the logic on the other side. Itana edim, if you had the case of the signatures, you might have said, mishum de la alma, because it's not your issue. It doesn't really have to do with you. And because of that, you didn't, right? Rashi says, now we're focusing on the second part. You wouldn't, right? Maybe you wouldn't bother changing your mind about it, right? It doesn't. So you said, these are my signatures. And then you realized, you said, oh, wait, this is a problem, right? Now, and then you basically change your mind and you say, but I was forced into it. That maybe we have reason to believe that you're telling the truth, because what's the big deal to you? So what if it was your signatures? This doesn't affect you in any way. And maybe that's what we could say, hapesh asau, hapesh itir, we're going to believe you. But iu de lenafshe, but when it affects you and the bottom line, you started off by saying this belongs to your father's, and then you realize, oh my God, now I'm going to lose all this money. Malo. Maybe you'll lie in the second part, and maybe we won't believe you in the second part because maybe you're just trying to get yourself out of it. So that's why we need those two cases. Next, in tomorrow's daf, we're going to get into, well, what about the others? Why couldn't we have learned all the cases from these two? Finishing up here, wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Chodesh Tov. Meet up, right? We'll get to tomorrow's daf. I'll be posted soon after this one. Have a Shabbat Shalom, Chodesh Tov.